Hi guys! So it's been a little while since we read the BFG, but today I'm going to read you the next two chapters. And if you've forgotten, what just happened was the blood bottler giant came because he thought that there was a human being in the BFG's cave, which of course there was. Sophie was there. And he tried to find Sophie. Sophie hid herself inside of the snozzcumber. But the giant took a bite of the snozzcumber, and Sophie went in his mouth, but then he was so disgusted by how the snozzcumber tasted, he spit it all out, and Sophie was okay. And the giant, the BFG, had just talked about how he would like to disappear all the giants. He wants to get rid of all the giants. And Sophie said she would be happy to help him. So, the next chapter is called Frobscottle and Whizzpoppers. And here's the picture. Frobscottle and Whizzpoppers. By now, Sophie was beginning to feel not only extremely hungry, but very thirsty as well. Had she been at home, she would have finished her breakfast long ago. Are you sure there's nothing else to eat around here except those disgusting, smelly snozzcumbers? She asked. Not even a fizzwinkle, answered the BFG. In that case, may I please have a little water? She said. Water? The BFG said, frowning mightily. What is water? We drink it, Sophie said. What do you drink? Frobscottle, announced the big friendly giant. All giants is drinking Frobscottle. Is it as nasty as your snozzcumbers? Sophie asked. Nasty? Cried the BFG. Never is it nasty. Frobscottle is sweet and jumbly. He got up from his chair and went to a second huge cupboard. He opened it and took out a glass bottle that must have been 6 feet tall. The liquid inside it was pale green, and the bottle was half full. Here is Frobscottle, he cried, holding up the bottle, proud and high, as though it contained some rare wine. Delumptuous, fizzy Frobscottle, he shouted. He gave it a shake, and the green stuff began to fizz like mad. But look! It's fizzing the wrong way, Sophie cried, and indeed it was. How could something fizz the wrong way? So imagine like a soda or a fizzy drink, and think about the way the bubbles in that go. How could this be fizzing the wrong way? Well, if the right way is to go up, then the wrong way must be to... The bubbles, instead of traveling upwards and bursting on the surface, were shooting downwards and bursting at the bottom. A pale green frothy fizz was forming at the bottom of the bottle. What on earth is you meaning the wrong way? Asked the BFG. In our fizzy drinks, Sophie said, the bubbles always go up and burst at the top. Upwards is the wrong way, cried the BFG. You mustn't ever be having the bubbles going upwards. That the most flush-bunking rubbish I ever is hearing. Why do you say that? Sophie asked. You is asking me why? Cried the BFG, waving the enormous bottle around as though he were conducting an orchestra. You is actually meaning to tell me you cannot see why it is a scrawny mistake to have the bubbles flying up instead of down? You said it was flush-bunking. Now you say it's scrawty. Which is it? Sophie asked politely. Both, cried the BFG. It is a flush-bunking and a scrawny mistake to let the bubbles go upwards. If you can't see why, you must be as quacky as a duckhound. By Ringo, your head must be so full of frog squinkers and buzzwangles, I is frittered to know how you can think at all. Why shouldn't the bubbles go upward? Sophie asked. I will explain, said the BFG, but tell me first, what name is you calling your Frobscottle by? One is Coke, Sophie said. Another is Pepsi. There are lots of them. What are some other Frobscottles that you might drink besides Coke and Pepsi? Think about maybe drinking Fanta or Sprite or Vimto. And the bubbles is all going up? They all go up, Sophie said. Catastrophe! Cried the BFG. Up-going bubbles is a catastrophous disastrophe. Will you please tell me why? Sophie said. If you will listen carefully, I will try to explain, said the BFG, but your brain is so full of bug wifles, I doubt you will ever understand. I'll do my best, Sophie said patiently. Very well, then. When you is drinking this cokey drink of yours, said the BFG, it is going straight down into your tummy. Is that right, or is it left? It's right, Sophie said. Of course, she means correct, not turning right. And the bubbles is going also into your tummy. Right or left? Right again, Sophie said. And the bubbles is fizzing upwards? Of course, Sophie said. Which means, said the BFG, that they will all come swish-whiffling up your throat and out of your mouth and make a foulsome, belchy burp. Is that true? Have you drunk a fizzy drink and then had to burp? It's happened to me before. That is often true, Sophie said, but what's wrong with a little burp now and again? It's sort of fun. Burping is filthsome, the BFG said. Us giants is never doing it. Well, that's interesting. I kind of think of giants as being kind of gross. Like maybe they would burp or like be dirty. But BFG is saying, we do not burp. But with your drink, Sophie said. What was it you called it? Frobscottle, said the BFG. With Frobscottle, Sophie said, the bubbles in your tummy will be going downwards, and that could have a far nastier result. Why nasty? Asked the BFG, frowning. Because, Sophie said, blushing a little, if they go down instead of up, they'll be coming out somewhere else, with an even louder and ruder noise. What is she talking about? What kind of noise is she talking about? A whizzpopper, cried the BFG, beaming at her. Us giants is making whizzpoppers all the time. Whiz-popping is a sign of happiness. It is music to our ears. You surely is not telling me that a little whiz-popping is forbidden among human beings. It is considered extremely rude, Sophie said. But you is whiz-popping, is you not, now and again? Asked the BFG. Everyone is whiz-popping, if that's what you call it, Sophie said. Kings and queens are whiz-popping. Presidents are whiz-popping. Glamorous film stars are whiz-popping. Little babies are whiz-popping. But where I come from, it's not polite to talk about it. Redunculous, cried the BFG. If everyone is making whiz-poppers, then why not talk about it? We is now having a swiggle of this delicious Frobscottle, and you will see the happy result. The BFG shook the bottle vigorously. The pale green stuff fizzed and bubbled. He removed the cork and took a tremendous gurgling swig. It's glummy, he cried. I love it. For a few moments, the big friendly giant stood quite still, and a look of absolute ecstasy began to spread over his long, wrinkly face. So absolute ecstasy is like so much joy and happiness. Then suddenly the heavens opened and he let fly with a series of the loudest and rudest noises Sophie had ever heard in her life. They reverberated around the walls of the cave like thunder, and the glass jars rattled on their shelves. What do you think that means, reverberated? Make a picture of that in your head. So these noises he's making, they reverberated around the walls of the cave. So it's moving around the walls of the cave. It's like thunder, and the glass jars are rattling on their shelves. Like bounced around to the different walls. That's what reverberated means. So it's like when a noise hits different walls and bounces back over and over again. But most astonishing of all, the force of the explosion actually actually lifted the enormous giant clear off his feet like a rocket. "Whoopee!" he cried when he came down to earth again. "Now that is whiz-popping for you." Sophie burst out laughing. She couldn't help it. So here's a picture of the BFG whiz-popping. "Have some yourself," cried the BFG, tipping the neck of the enormous bottle towards her. "Don't you have a cup?" Sophie said. "No cups, only bottle." Sophie opened her mouth, and very gently the BFG tipped the bottle forward and poured some of the fabulous Frobscottle down her throat. And oh gosh, how delicious it was! It was sweet and refreshing. It tasted of vanilla and cream, with just the faintest trace of raspberries on the edge of the flavor. And the bubbles were wonderful. Sophie could actually feel them bouncing and bursting all around her tummy. It was an amazing sensation. It felt as though hundreds of tiny people were dancing a jig inside her and tickling her with their toes. It was lovely. "It's lovely!" she cried. "Just wait," said the BFG, flapping his ears. Sophie could feel the bubbles traveling lower and lower down her tummy, and then, suddenly, inevitably, the explosion came. So it comes suddenly and inevitably. Have you heard that word before? It came suddenly and inevitably. It means it's going to happen, no matter what. The trumpet sounded, and she, too, made the walls of the cavern ring with the sound of music and thunder. What is she doing? It's a bit rude. "Bravo!" shouted the BFG, waving the bottle. "You is very good for a beginner. Let's have some more." And that's the end of the chapter. So that's a really fun one to picture in your head. Just picture that again in your head. What happened in that chapter? We know who the characters are, so picture the characters. Sophie and the BFG. We know where they were, the setting, so picture the setting in your head. They're in the cave. We know there's a table. We know there's a bottle of the drink. We know there's bottles of dreams on a shelf. So picture all those things. Then picture the events. The drinking. Of the... I just forgot what it was called. The Frobscottle. The drinking of the Frobscottle and what happens when they do it. So picture all of that in your head. It's a really good strategy when you're reading. After you finish a chapter, kind of go over it again in your head. Who were the characters? Where were they? What was the setting? What important events happened in that chapter? And picture that again in your head. And if you don't remember any of it or something seems kind of confusing, go back and reread part. And then try and think of it in your head again and see if you can put it in your head. Okay. The next chapter is called Journey to Dream Country. After the mad Frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on top of the enormous table. "You is feeling better now?" asked the big friendly giant. "Much better, thank you," Sophie said. "Whenever I is feeling a bit scrotty," the BFG said, "a few gollops of Frobscottle is always making me hopscotchy again." "I must say it's quite an experience," Sophie said. "It's a raz-twizzler," the BFG said. "It's a gloriumptious." He turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream-catching net. "I is galloping off now," he said, "to catch some more wopsy-whiffling dreams for my collection. I is doing this every day without missing. Is you wishing to come with me?" "Not me, thank you very much," Sophie said. "Not with those other giants lurking outside." So picture the other giants outside. So they're lurking. What does that mean, that they're lurking outside? They're just standing there, kind of waiting to maybe catch a human being. That's lurking. You're kind of standing around and waiting and looking like, I might get something tasty, or I might do something bad, or I might see something interesting. "I is snuggling you very cozy into the pocket of my waistcoat," said the BFG. "Then no one is seeing you." Before Sophie could protest, He had picked her up off the table and popped her into the waistcoat pocket. There was plenty of room in there. "Is you wishing for a little hole to peep out from?" he asked her. "There's one here already," she said. She had found a small hole in the pocket, and when she put one eye close to it, she could see out very well indeed. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled his suitcase with empty glass jars. He closed the lid, picked up the suitcase in one hand, took the pole with the net on the end in the other hand, and marched toward the entrance of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set off across the great hot yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay and the dead trees stood and where all the other giants were skulking about. So skulking is a little bit like lurking, but it's a little bit more like dangerous, like they're going to be doing something bad. This is a new setting also, so we can picture our new setting in our heads. This yellow wasteland, there's nothing really growing, blue rocks, dead trees, all these giants around. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket of the leather waistcoat, had one eye glued to the little hole. She saw the group of enormous giants about 300 yards ahead. "Hold your breath," the BFG whispered down to her. "Cross your fingers. Here we go. We is going right past all these other giants. Is you seeing that whopping great one, the one nearest to us?" "I see him," Sophie whispered back, quivering. "That is the horriblest of them all, and the biggest of them. He is called the flesh-lump-eating giant." "I don't want to hear about him," Sophie said. "He is 54 feet high," the BFG said softly as he jogged along, "and he is swallowing human beings like they is sugar lumps, 2 or 3 at a time." "You're making me nervous," Sophie said. "I is nervous myself," the BFG whispered. "I always gets as jumpy as a jog hopper when the flesh lump eating giant is around." "Keep away from him," Sophie pleaded. "Not possible," the BFG answered. "He is galloping easily 2 times as quickly as me." "Shall we turn back?" Sophie said. "Turning back is worse," the BFG said. "If they is seeing me running away, they is all giving chase and throwing rocks." "They would never eat you, though, would they?" Sophie asked. "Giants is never guzzling other giants," the BFG said. "They is fighting and squarreling a lot with each other, but never guzzling. Human beings is more tasty to them." The giants had already spotted the BFG, and all heads were turned, watching him as he jogged forward. He was aiming to pass well to the right of the group. Through her little peephole, Sophie saw the flesh-lump-eating giant moving over to intercept them. He didn't hurry. He just loped over casually to a point where the BFG would have to pass. The others loped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them altogether, and she recognized the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them as they loped slowly across the plain with long, lolloping strides, heading for the BFG. So try and picture them loping. It's used that word several times. When you picture them loping, they're definitely moving. What kind of movement would they have? They're very tall. They might have very long legs. It's kind of like a whoop, whoop. And an air of menace about them. Do you think that's a good thing? A bad thing? What do you think? An air of menace. It seems bad because they aren't kind to the BFG. The BFG is scared of them. So is Sophie. So it's a bad thing. It kind of means like a danger. Like danger is coming. There's this air of danger around them. "Here comes the runty one," boomed the flesh lump eater. "Ho, ho there, runty one! Where is your splatch-winkling away to in such a hefty hurry?" He shot out an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG by the hair. The BFG didn't struggle. He simply stopped and stood quite still and said, "Be so kind as to be letting go of my hair, flesh lump eater." The flesh lump eater released him and stepped back a pace. The other giants stood around, waiting for the fun to start. But interesting, it seems like um, these other giants are kind of bullies. They're kind of being mean to the BFG, but the BFG isn't yelling. He's not getting upset. He's just standing there. Like, please let go of me. It seems like he's used to this because he's responding in a way that's like, whatever. Just go away. Just let me go. So he's used to this. He knows it's going to happen. He knows he's going to get teased, and he's just trying to make it not so bad and just easily go away. Now then, you little grobsquiffler, boomed the flesh lump eater. We is all of us wanting to know where you is galloping off to every day in the daytime. Nobody ought to be galloping off to anywhere until it is getting dark. The human beings could easily be spotting you and starting a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen. Is we not? We is not, shouted the other giants. Go back to your cave, runty one. I is not galloping to any human being country, the BFG said. I is going to other places. I is thinking, said the flesh lump eater, that you is catching human beings and keeping them as pets. Right, you is, cried the blood bottler. Just now is hearing him chittering away to one of them in his cave. You is welcome to go and search my cave from frack to bunt, the BFG answered. You can go looking into every crook and nanny. There is no human beans or stringy beans or runner beans or jelly beans or any other beans in there. Interesting. So the giants are starting to suspect, to think maybe he's taking human beings as a pet. And the blood bottler speaks up and says, yeah, I heard him talking to somebody. The BFG says, go search my cave. There's no one in there. It's making me think maybe there was a reason why he wanted Sophie to come with him. Why do you think he wanted Sophie to come with him now that we've read this part? It seems to me like maybe he knew that other giants would go search his cave when he was gone, and he wanted to keep Sophie safe. And he's like a caring giant, and he wants her to be okay. So he decided to take her with him, and then that would be safer. Sophie crouched still as a mouse inside the BFG's pocket. She hardly dared breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away. Through the tiny peephole, she watched the giants clustering around the poor BFG. How revolting they were! All of them had piggy little eyes and enormous mouths with thick sausage lips. So picture that. If you're imagining these giants in your head, here's a really great description of them. Piggy little eyes and enormous mouths with thick sausage lips. Add that to what you know about the setting. Remember we learned about the setting of the dead trees and the rocks, and all these giants hanging around. When the flesh lumper was speaking, she got a glimpse of his tongue. It was jet black, like a slab of black steak. Every one of them was more than twice as tall as the BFG. Suddenly, the flesh lump eater shot out two enormous hands and grabbed the BFG around the waist. He tossed him high in the air and shouted, "Catch him, man-hugger!" The man-hugger caught him. The other giants spread out quickly in a large circle, each giant about 20 yards from his neighbor, preparing for the game they were going to play. Now the man-hugger threw the BFG high and far, shouting, "Catch him, bone cruncher!" So what game are they playing? What are they doing with the BFG? Picture it in your head. The bone cruncher ran forward and caught the tumbling BFG and immediately swung him up again. "Catch him, child chewer!" he shouted, and so it went on. The giants were playing ball with the BFG, vying with each other to see who could throw him the highest. Sophie dug her nails into the sides of the pocket, trying to prevent herself from tumbling out when she was upside down. She felt as though she were in a barrel going over the Niagara Falls. The Niagara Falls are a really huge waterfall that's on the border between the United States and Canada. And in the olden days, a few people went over it in a barrel to see if they could live. It wasn't a good idea, but I think one person did survive. And all the time there was a fearful danger that one of the giants would fail to catch the BFG and he would go crashing to the ground. Catch him, meat dripper! Catch him, gizzard gulper! Catch him, maid masher! Catch him, blood bottler! Catch him! Catch him! Catch him! In the end, they got bored with the game. They dumped the poor BFG on the ground. He was dazed and shattered. They gave him a few kicks and shouted, "Run, you little runt! Let us be seeing how fast you is galloping!" The BFG ran. What else could he do? The giants picked up rocks and hurled them after him. He managed to dodge them. "Ruddy little runt," they shouted. "Troggy little twit, shrivelly little shrimp, mucky little midget, squaggly little squib, grubby little glub." At last the BFG got clear of them all, and in another couple of minutes the pack of giants was out of sight over the horizon. So we're going to stop there, although there's a few pages left in the chapter. We'll finish that chapter next time. But these events, this is really awful towards the BFG. I want you to think about this game they were playing with him, and I want you to think about if you were there with the BFG, or you were Sophie, what would you do? What would you do? You could think about what would you do if you were a human, like a child, like Sophie, or you could think about what would you do if you were another giant. What would you say? What would you do? Maybe what would you think or feel? How would you react if you were in this scene with the giants as they're playing this game? And I'd like you to add a response and record a video of yourself explaining something that you would say or do or feel or think if you were in this scene, either as a human or as a giant.